Viewer discretion is advised. This presentation contains subject matter related to a real-life disappearance, including discussions of paranoia and potential harm, which may be disturbing to some individuals. It's one of the most chilling pieces of footage you will ever see. A young man, 28 years old, walks calmly into an airport terminal. Moments later, he's sprinting for his life. He bolts past travelers, his eyes wide with a primal terror that cameras rarely capture. Without a second thought, he abandons his wallet, his phone, his passport, and all of his luggage. He barrels toward an exit, hurdles a nearly 10-foot-tall barbed wire fence with impossible agility, and vanishes into a dense sunflower field bordering the woods. He is never seen again. No body, no ransom note, no trace. The question that has haunted investigators, his family, and millions of people online for years is not just where did he go, but what was he running from? Because when you watch the security footage, you realize the most terrifying part of all. There was absolutely no one chasing him. This is the story of Lars Mittank, a man who walked into a Bulgarian airport for a routine medical checkup and disappeared from the face of the earth just 60 minutes later. His case has been called the most famous missing person on YouTube for one reason: that haunting video. But the video is just the final frantic chapter of a story that began days earlier. A story that descended from a carefree vacation into a paranoid nightmare. And it all started with a desperate, whispered phone call to his mother. A call where he told her to cancel his credit cards. A call where he claimed 4 men were trying to kill him. A call where he whispered the cryptic words, "They won't let me leave and they won't let me die." Who were they? And what did they want with an ordinary German tourist? To understand what happened in that airport, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to when everything was normal. July of 2014. Lars Mittank was, by all accounts, a completely average, happy-go-lucky 28-year-old. He lived a quiet life in Marne, Germany, worked at a local power plant, had a loving girlfriend and a close circle of friends. He was a massive fan of the Werder Bremen football club, a passion that would, in a strange twist of fate, become a catalyst for his entire ordeal. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't involved in drugs. He had no known history of mental illness. He was just a regular guy, excited to get away for a week with his high school buddies. The destination was Golden Sands, Bulgaria. It's a popular European resort town on the Black Sea, famous for its cheap beer, sprawling beaches, and vibrant nightlife. It was the perfect spot for a group of guys in their late 20s to blow off some steam. For the first few days, the trip was exactly what they'd hoped for. They spent their days swimming and relaxing on the beach, and their nights exploring the local bars and clubs. They were drinking, laughing, and making the kind of memories that are supposed to last a lifetime. There was no sign of trouble, no hint of the darkness that was about to unfold. Lars was having a great time, sending pictures back home, and enjoying the break from his routine. Everything was perfect, until one night it wasn't. The group was at a fast food restaurant late one evening when Lars got into an argument. It was a stupid, pointless conflict, the kind that happens in bars all over the world every single weekend. Lars, a loyal Werder Bremen fan, was wearing his team's jersey. He started talking soccer with another group of German tourists who happened to be fans of a rival team, Bayern Munich. The conversation turned from friendly banter to a heated disagreement. According to his friends, Lars walked away to avoid a physical confrontation. The group finished their food and headed back to the hotel, thinking the incident was over. But somehow, Lars got separated from them on the walk back. His friends made it to the hotel, assuming Lars was right behind them. When he didn't show up, they weren't immediately concerned. Maybe he'd met someone or stopped somewhere else. But Lars stumbled back to the resort hours later, alone and injured. He told his friends that after he left the restaurant, he'd been cornered by the same group of men from the bar. He said 4 men had hired a local to fight him, and he'd been punched in the head. The most significant injury was a hard blow to his left ear. He was in pain, but at the time, it seemed like nothing more than the unfortunate end to a drunken night. A black eye, a sore jaw, a story to tell. But that single punch to the ear would set in motion a chain of events that would lead directly to his disappearance. It was the first domino to fall. The next morning, Lars was in considerable pain. His ear was throbbing, and he couldn't hear properly. He went to a local clinic to get it checked out. A doctor examined him and delivered the bad news. He had a ruptured eardrum. It wasn't a life-threatening injury, But the doctor was firm on one point. Due to the change in cabin pressure during takeoff and landing, it was too dangerous for Lars to fly home with his friends that day. Flying could cause permanent damage, severe vertigo, or even worse complications. The doctor prescribed a common antibiotic, cefuroxime 500, and told Lars he should be fine to fly in a few days. This was the critical moment of separation. His friends had a flight to catch. They couldn't stay. Lars, ever the easygoing friend, insisted he would be fine. He was a grown man, he told them. He could handle a few extra days in a resort town by himself. He would find a cheap hotel near the airport, wait for his ear to heal, and catch the next available flight. They were reluctant, but he was persuasive. So they drove him to the bus station, gave him some cash, and said their goodbyes, promising to talk as soon as they landed. As they watched their friend wave from the bus stop, they had no idea it would be the last time they would ever see him in person. Lars Mittank was now completely alone in a foreign country, with a painful injury and a growing sense of unease. He took a taxi from the bus station and checked into a place called the Hotel Color. It was a cheap, run-down establishment near Varna Airport, a far cry from the lively beach resort he'd just left. And it was here, in the sterile quiet of this budget hotel, that his behavior began to change dramatically. The laid-back, confident man his friends knew started to evaporate, replaced by someone frightened and paranoid. The hotel's security cameras captured him pacing the hallways, looking out of windows and hiding in the elevator. He seemed to be watching for someone, or hiding from something. That night, he made his first panicked phone call to his mother, Sandra Mittank, back in Germany. The conversation was frantic and disjointed. He spoke in hushed tones, as if he was afraid of being overheard. He told her something was wrong with the hotel. He didn't feel safe. He asked her to do something strange, to cancel his credit cards. He claimed that the 4 men from the bar fight had followed him, and that they were trying to rob or kill him. Sandra was confused and terrified. Who were these 4 men? Why would they follow him over a minor bar dispute? She tried to calm him down, to reason with him, but he was growing more agitated. He told her he had found a place to hide for the night, and then abruptly the line went dead. For hours, his mother was left in a state of sheer panic, thousands of miles away, utterly helpless, wondering if her son was even still alive. Sandra Mittank's world froze. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, a void where her son's voice had just been. She called back, again and again and again. Each call went straight to voicemail, each unanswered ring a fresh stab of terror. He was hiding, that's what he said. But hiding from what? Or from whom? And where? In a hotel? An alleyway? Was he crouched in some dark corner of a foreign city, hurt and terrified, while she was stuck behind a phone, an entire continent away? Every possible scenario, each one darker than the last, played out in her mind. For the rest of that night, there was no sleep for Sandra. There was only the cold, heavy dread of a mother's worst nightmare, the agonizing wait for a phone that would not ring. As the sun rose over Bulgaria on the morning of Tuesday, July 8, 2014, Lars Mittank re-emerged. We don't know where he spent those terrifying, silent hours. We don't know if he slept, or if he stayed awake all night, watching the shadows, his paranoia growing with every passing minute. What we do know is that somehow, he made his way from wherever he was hiding and flagged down a taxi. His destination, Varna Airport. This was it. The final leg of the journey. He just had to get on a plane and this whole nightmare would be over. The taxi driver who picked him up would later become a key witness. He described his passenger as quiet, reserved. But he noticed something strange. Lars's pupils were enormous, wide and black, completely dilated. It's a detail that has fueled endless speculation. Was it a sign of drug use? Had he taken something to cope with the pain or the fear? Or was it simply the physical manifestation of pure, unadulterated terror? The body's natural response to a massive adrenaline surge, the kind you get when you believe with every fiber of your being that your life is in danger. The driver didn't press him. He just drove, ferrying the silent, wide-eyed German tourist to his ticket home. Lars arrived at Varna Airport, a bustling modern hub of glass and steel. For any other traveler, it would have been a place of relief, of endings and beginnings. For Lars, it must have felt like the final checkpoint in a race for his life. He walked inside, past the crowds of vacationers laughing and pulling their suitcases, And he did something that proves he was still thinking, at least somewhat rationally. He texted his mother. A short, simple message. "I've made it to the airport." You can almost feel the wave of relief that must have washed over Sandra. He was there. He was safe. He was surrounded by people, by security. The worst was over. But before he could check in, there was one last hurdle. His ear. The doctor back in Golden Sands had told him he might not be fit to fly with a ruptured eardrum due to the change in air pressure. So Lars sought out the airport's medical center to get a professional opinion, to get the final all clear. It was a responsible, logical thing to do. It was also the decision that would seal his fate. He found the doctor's office, a small sterile room tucked away from the main concourse. The man on duty was Dr. Kosta Kostov. He examined Lars's ear and confirmed what he already knew. It was a bad rupture. But he told Lars that while it wasn't ideal, he would be fine to fly. He prescribed an antibiotic, cefuroxime 500, the very same drug Lars had been so afraid of the day before. Dr. Kostov would later describe Lars's behavior in that office as deeply unsettling. He said Lars was incredibly nervous, erratic. His eyes darted around the room. He seemed unstable, on the verge of panic. He was mumbling, his words laced with a growing sense of dread. And then Lars gave the doctor the first real clue about the source of his fear. He started talking about the men from the hotel, the Bulgarians or Russians he'd argued with. But his story had changed. It was no longer just a simple brawl. He told the doctor that these men, 4 of them, had been sent to kill him. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, and said that he couldn't trust the medicine they gave him in Bulgaria. He asked the doctor about the cefuroxime. "What is this? What will it do to me?" He was convinced the men from the fight had hired people, that they were hunting him, and that they wouldn't let him leave the country alive. Dr. Kostov, a seasoned medical professional, tried to calm him down. He assured Lars that he was safe here, that this was an airport, a secure location. But Lars wasn't listening. He was trapped in his own reality, a reality in which every shadow held a threat and every stranger was a potential assassin. He looked at the doctor, his wide eyes pleading, and said, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." Just then, as if on cue, the door to the medical office opened. A man in a uniform, an airport construction worker, walked in for a routine matter. But Lars didn't see a construction worker. In his heightened state of paranoia, he saw a threat. He saw one of them. His demeanor shifted instantly from panic to terrified. Dr. Kostov said it was like a switch was flipped. Lars began to tremble. And then another man appeared. This time it was a police officer, entering the medical bay for a completely unrelated reason. To Lars, this must have been the final terrifying confirmation of his deepest fears. The authorities, the men in uniforms, they were in on it. They were here for him. There was no escape. His survival instinct, now twisted and warped by paranoia, took over completely. He shot up from his chair. Without another word, he bolted. He sprinted out of the doctor's office, leaving everything behind on the examination table. His wallet filled with cash and credit cards. His identification. His passport, the one document he needed to get home. And his cell phone, his only link to his mother, to his friends, to his entire life back in Germany. He abandoned it all. He burst back out into the main terminal, a man possessed. Airport security cameras captured what happened next. In footage that has since become infamous, viewed by millions of people around the world. The video shows Lars running at a full sprint, his arms pumping, his face a mask of pure terror. He dodges stunned travelers and their luggage carts, a blur of frantic motion against the backdrop of mundane airport activity. He looks less like a man running to something, and more like a man running from something, something terrifying that only he can see. He ran past the check-in counters, past the cafes, past the duty-free shops. He wasn't heading for a gate. He was heading for the nearest exit, running for his life. He burst through the main sliding glass doors and out into the bright Bulgarian sunshine. But he didn't stop. He sprinted across the pavement, past the taxi lane where he'd arrived just an hour earlier. He ran straight for the airport's perimeter fence. This wasn't a small fence. It was a formidable barrier nearly 10 feet tall, topped with barbed wire. It was designed to keep people out, to secure the airfield. For Lars, it was the final obstacle. With a surge of adrenaline, he began to climb. He scrambled up the chain link with impossible speed, somehow clearing the barbed wire at the top without a moment's hesitation. He dropped down on the other side into a massive, dense field of sunflowers, many of them taller than a man. For a moment, his head was visible above the sea of yellow flowers. And then he was gone. He had vanished. The most famous missing person on YouTube had been captured on camera for the very last time, performing one of the most bizarre and inexplicable acts imaginable, before disappearing from the face of the earth. In the sterile, quiet confines of the Varna Airport medical office, a profound and chilling silence descended. The doctor, the airport staff, they all just stood there, frozen, staring at the empty doorway through which Lars Mittank had just bolted. One moment he was a patient, agitated, yes, but physically present. The next, he was a blur of motion, a phantom escaping a threat no one else could see. His luggage, his wallet, his passport, and his cell phone sat abandoned on the floor, a bizarre collection of a life left behind in an instant. The fundamental tools for existence in the modern world, discarded as if they were meaningless. For a few seconds there was just confusion. Was this a prank? A medical episode? But as the seconds stretched into a minute, the reality of the situation began to set in. This wasn't a joke. A man had just sprinted, as if for his life, out of a secure international airport and vanished into the dense, unfamiliar Bulgarian landscape. The authorities were called immediately. Varna Airport police were on the scene within minutes, but they were already behind. Lars had a head start, fueled by a terror that defied all logic. Their initial search was methodical but fruitless. They scoured the airport perimeter, a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, looking for any sign of a breach. They checked the access roads, the parking lots, the nearby fields. They spoke to the taxi driver who dropped him off, the pharmacist he'd visited, the doctor he'd fled from. Every account painted the same picture. A young man descending into a spiral of intense paranoia. But a picture of his state of mind did nothing to reveal his physical location. The area surrounding Varna Airport isn't a bustling city center. It's a sprawling, semi-rural expanse of sunflower fields, dense forest, and scrubland. It's a place where a person who wants to disappear can. Back in Germany, his friends had landed. They were relieved to be home, expecting a text from Lars any minute to say he'd boarded a later flight. But the text never came. Instead, the call came from the airline, then from the Bulgarian authorities. The news was incoherent, nonsensical. Lars ran. He left his things. He's missing. Their vacation, which had ended in a confusing and slightly worrying separation, had just morphed into an absolute nightmare. Guilt began to creep in. The fight on the beach, leaving him behind. Should they have forced him to come with them? Insisted he get on that bus? These are the questions that would haunt them forever. And then there was the phone call that no parent should ever have to receive. In Germany, Sandra Mittank picked up the phone to a voice speaking in broken German. A Bulgarian official trying to explain the unexplainable. Your son Lars came to the airport. He saw a doctor. And then he ran away. We don't know where he is. Imagine that. The words don't compute. It's a story that makes no sense. You try to piece it together, your mind racing, grasping for any detail that can anchor this madness to reality. Sandra's last contact with her son had been that strange, frantic text message, "What is Sef Brazil 500?" followed by the chilling message that men in a dark blue car were trying to rob or kill him. She had been worried then, but she had assumed it was a misunderstanding, a moment of panic that would pass. She had told him to see a doctor to be safe. Now, it seemed her advice had led him to the very place he would vanish from. Within 48 hours, Sandra Mittank was on a plane to Varna, flying into the heart of her own personal hell. She was a mother on a mission, fueled by a primal need to find her son. But the moment she landed, she was confronted with the crushing reality of her situation. She was in a foreign country, surrounded by a language she didn't understand and a system she couldn't navigate. The police were polite, but their resources were limited. To them, Lars was initially just another tourist who'd had too much to drink, gotten into a fight, and perhaps run off. They showed her the CCTV footage, and she watched the last recorded moments of her son's known existence. She saw the caution, the nervousness, the final explosive burst of panicked energy. It was like watching a stranger. This wasn't the calm, sensible boy she had raised. Frustrated by the pace of the official investigation and desperate for answers, Sandra did what any parent in her position would do. She took matters into her own hands. She hired a local private investigator, financing the search with her family's savings. They printed thousands of flyers with Lars's face on them, plastered across Varna and the Golden Sands resort area. They walked the streets, showing his picture to anyone who would listen. They retraced his steps from the HVDViva Club hotel to the beach where the fight happened, to the strange, cheap hotel he'd stayed in for that one terrifying night alone. The private investigator began to dig, and the timeline of Lars's last 24 hours became slightly clearer, but infinitely more confusing. They confirmed the fight. It wasn't just a simple scuffle. Lars, a fan of the Werder Bremen football club, had gotten into a dispute with a group of men who were fans of a rival club, Bayern Munich. It was a stupid, pointless argument that escalated. Lars's friend said he took a blow to the head and the ear. A witness at the scene later claimed Lars was hit with so much force that the object used might have been a bottle, or even a telescopic baton. This wasn't just a punch. This was a serious assault. This new detail cast a dark shadow over everything. Was Lars's paranoia real? Was he not fleeing a phantom but a tangible threat? Did the men from the fight follow him? Did they see him get left behind by his friends and decide to finish what they started? It was a compelling theory. It explained his fear. It explained why he felt he was being hunted. He told his mother they didn't want him to fly. Maybe they were the they. Maybe they followed him from the resort to the airport, and the man who walked into the doctor's office wasn't an airport employee, but one of his assailants there to intimidate him, to stop him from leaving the country, from being able to identify them to authorities. But as plausible as that sounds, it clashes violently with the evidence Lars himself left behind. If you are running for your life from dangerous men, if your goal is to escape and survive, why would you abandon the three things you need most? Your passport to cross a border, your phone to call for help, and your wallet with the cash and credit cards needed to buy a ticket, a meal, or a room for the night. Running from the airport without those items wasn't an escape plan. It was a self-imposed sentence to becoming a non-person, a ghost, unable to prove who you are, unable to pay your way, unable to contact anyone. The search of the area around the airport intensified. Police, volunteers, and Sandra's private investigator fanned out into the dense, thorny wilderness. This is a landscape that is brutally unforgiving. Acres of 6-foot-high sunflower fields that can hide a person completely. Patches of dense, almost impenetrable forest. Discarded farm equipment and abandoned buildings. It's a place where the summer heat is oppressive and water is scarce. For a man with a potential head injury, possibly disoriented from medication, and dressed in only a t-shirt and shorts, the odds of survival out here alone were plummeting with every passing hour. The searchers found nothing. No footprints. No discarded clothing. No sign of a struggle. It was as if the earth had opened up and swallowed him whole the second he cleared that fence. Lars Mittank had run out of the sight of the cameras and, in doing so, had seemingly run out of reality itself. His digital life had ended, his physical life had been abandoned, and his actual breathing presence on this planet had ceased to be traceable. He was gone. But the search had only just begun, and the story was about to take a turn that would attract the eyes of the entire world, transforming a private family tragedy into a global obsession, and cementing Lars's status as the internet's most haunting mystery. Back in Germany, a phone rang. It was Sandra Mittank, Lars's mother. The voice on the other end was one of Lars's friends, calling from the airport in Germany after their flight had landed. The news was confusing, disjointed. Lars wasn't with them. He'd stayed behind. There was an issue with his ear, a doctor, a prescription. He was supposed to be on the next flight. Sandra's maternal instincts kicked in. A low hum of anxiety that quickly escalated into a roaring siren of panic. She tried calling her son's phone. It went straight to voicemail. Again and again. The hours ticked by. The next flight from Varna was scheduled to land. She waited for the call that would tell her he was safe, that it was all a big misunderstanding. But that call never came. Instead, the call that did come was from the airline. Lars Mittank had checked in for his flight, but he never boarded. He was gone. In that moment, the world tilted on its axis for Sandra. Her son, a responsible, level-headed young man, had vanished in a foreign country with no money, no passport, and no phone. The story he had told her on the phone just hours earlier, about the men who wouldn't let him leave, the mysterious hotel, the fear in his voice, now replayed in her mind not as a strange, isolated incident, but as the prologue to a nightmare. Within days, Sandra Mittank was on a plane to Bulgaria. She was a mother on a mission, fueled by a terrifying combination of love and dread. She arrived in the sprawling, sun-baked resort town of Golden Sands, a place that for her was not a paradise, but the last known location of her son. With a private investigator she hired, she began to retrace Lars's final steps. They went to the HVD Hotel Color, the place he'd fled in the middle of the night. They spoke to the staff, who remembered the scared German tourist. They went to the beach, to the bars, to the fast food restaurant where the fight had happened. They showed his picture to anyone who would look, their pleas for information often lost in the chasm of a language barrier. The Bulgarian police were investigating, but to them it was one of many summer incidents. A tourist gets into a fight, gets scared, runs off. It happens. They assured her he would likely turn up in a few days, perhaps after his money ran out. But Sandra knew her son. This wasn't him. This wasn't a young man blowing off steam. This was something else entirely. Something was terribly wrong. Frustrated by the pace of the official investigation and desperate to get her son's face in front of as many people as possible, the Mittank family did something that would fundamentally change the nature of the search. They turned to the media. They contacted German television stations, newspapers, anyone who would listen, and they created a Facebook page, Findet Lars Mittank, Find Lars Mittank. They posted his photo, a smiling, handsome 28-year-old, along with the details of his disappearance. The story began to spread, first through German news outlets, then across European media. A young man on his first vacation abroad vanishes under bizarre circumstances. It was a compelling, frightening story. The Facebook page gained thousands of followers overnight. Every share, every comment was a digital flare sent up into the darkness, a desperate hope that someone, somewhere had seen something. The increased pressure from the family and the German media worked. The Bulgarian authorities, now under a microscope, agreed to release a piece of evidence they had been holding. It was security camera footage. Footage from inside Varna Airport, taken on the morning of July 8, 2014, the morning Lars disappeared. The world was about to see Lars Mittank's final known moments, and no one could have prepared for what that footage would show. The video is grainy, silent, and clinical. It begins with Lars walking into the airport terminal. He's carrying his luggage, a large backpack and a shoulder bag. He looks like any other traveler. He walks with purpose, heading towards the airport's medical center to get clearance to fly from the doctor on duty. He enters the small office, and the camera's view is now from inside that room. We see him sit down and talk to the doctor. There is no audio, so we can only guess at the conversation. Lars appears calm at first, but then his demeanor shifts. He seems to grow agitated, restless. He stands up, sits down. At one point, he leans forward, speaking intently. The doctor would later state that Lars was nervous and erratic, claiming the cefprozil antibiotic he'd been prescribed wasn't working. During this consultation, another man enters the office. He is reportedly an airport construction worker, there for a minor issue. His presence seems to have a profound and immediate effect on Lars. Lars becomes visibly distressed. He mutters something to the doctor that the doctor couldn't understand. And then the phone call. While still in the office, Lars calls his mother one last time. The footage shows him on the phone, his body language tense. We now know what he was saying in that terrifying whispered call. They won't let me fly, and they won't let me die. He asks her to cancel his credit cards. He's panicked. He's convinced people are trying to kill him. Then it happens. In a sudden, explosive movement that defies all logic, Lars jumps up from his chair. He says, "I don't want to die here. I have to go." He bolts from the doctor's office, leaving everything behind. His wallet, his passport, his phone, his luggage, everything he owns. The airport's exterior cameras pick him up a moment later. He bursts through the main entrance doors, sprinting at full speed across the forecourt. He doesn't look back. He runs past taxis, past travelers, a man possessed by a singular desperate goal, to get away. He runs as if his life depends on it. He reaches the edge of the airport property, a place bordered by a high barbed wire fence. Without a moment's hesitation, he leaps, climbing the fence with an animalistic agility, and disappears into the dense sunflower field on the other side. And then nothing. That is the last confirmed sighting of Lars Mittank. He ran into a field of sunflowers under the bright Bulgarian sun and simply vanished from the face of the earth. When this footage was released to the public, the case exploded. It was no longer just a news story, it was a global phenomenon. The video was uploaded to YouTube and it went viral. Millions of people watched the silent, haunting footage. They saw a young man in the grip of an unseen terror, a man running from something or someone that no one else could see. The internet did what the internet does, became obsessed. Forums on Reddit, like Unsolved Mysteries, dedicated massive threads to the case. Amateur sleuths from around the world began dissecting the footage frame by frame. Who was the man who entered the doctor's office? Was he really just a construction worker? Or was he part of the they Lars mentioned on the phone? What did the doctor say to him? Could you read their lips? Every pixel was analyzed. Every shadow was scrutinized. The antibiotic cefprozil was researched exhaustively. Could it have caused a rare, severe psychotic reaction? Some medical experts said it was possible, though highly unlikely. Others pointed to a potential head injury from the fight, a concussion causing paranoia and delirium. And then there were the darker theories, that Lars had stumbled upon something he shouldn't have seen: drug trafficking, human trafficking, and that his escape from the airport wasn't an act of paranoia, but a desperate and ultimately failed attempt to escape a very real threat. The video gave the world a face, a final frantic moment, but it offered zero answers. Instead, it ignited a firestorm of speculation that turned millions of people into armchair detectives, each with their own theory, each convinced they held the key. The search for Lars Mittank was no longer confined to his family and the Bulgarian police. The search had gone global, and soon, from all corners of the world, the sightings began to pour in, turning the hunt for one missing man into a chaotic international manhunt fueled by the very internet that had made him famous. The question was no longer just, where is Lars? But, is this him? And in the echo chamber of the internet, that question became a global obsession. Almost immediately, Lars Mittank's face was everywhere. Not just on news sites or in German papers, but on Reddit threads, on Facebook groups, on forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries. His poster, with its two contrasting photos, the smiling, healthy vacationer and the haunted, desperate man at the airport, was a perfect storm of intrigue. It was shareable, it was memorable, and because of that, Lars Mittank became a ghost seen by everyone everywhere. The first sightings were flickers. A tourist in a European city thinks they saw a tall, blonde man begging for change. A truck driver crossing a border reports a disoriented hitchhiker who matched the description. Each tip was a spark of hope for the family, funneled through the Facebook page his mother Sandra had set up. But these were just drops in the bucket. The real deluge, the sighting that would come to define the case for years, came from halfway around the world, in a place so impossibly far, so disconnected from a Bulgarian beach resort, that it had to be either a complete fabrication or the most important clue yet. The place was Porto Velho, Brazil, a remote city deep in the Amazon basin. A grainy, shaky video surfaced, filmed from a truck, showing a man walking along a dusty highway. He was emaciated, bearded, and barefoot. He wore only a pair of tattered shorts, but his gait, his build, the shape of his head, it was uncannily similar to Lars. The video went nuclear. How could Lars Mittank, who vanished from an airport in Varna, Bulgaria, end up on a roadside in the Brazilian rainforest? The theories were as wild as the location itself. He'd stowed away on a cargo ship. He'd been a victim of human trafficking and had finally escaped. He'd suffered a complete psychotic break and had been wandering the globe for 2 years, an aimless phantom. For the Mittank family, and for the thousands of online sleuths following the case, this wasn't just a theory. It was a tangible lead. The resemblance was too strong to ignore. The story, however improbable, was a lifeline. The Brazilian media picked it up, and soon local police were involved. The German embassy was notified. This wasn't just a random Reddit comment. This was a full-blown international incident, a potential breakthrough. The man on the highway became known as the Porto Velho Man. For a few weeks in 2016, the entire focus of the search for Lars Mittank shifted from the Black Sea coast of Europe to the sweltering heat of the Amazon. Then they found him. Local authorities located the man from the video. The world held its breath. Photos were sent to the private investigator and the family. And just as quickly as the hope had ignited, it was extinguished. It wasn't Lars. The man was a Canadian citizen, a former missionary named Anton Pilipa, who had his own tragic story of mental health struggles and had been missing from his own family for 5 years. The viral video that was supposed to bring Lars home instead brought closure for another family, in another country, who had been living their own nightmare. It was a bittersweet resolution. A man was saved, but he wasn't their man. For the Mittanks, it was another dead end, but this one was different. It was a public spectacle, a global roller coaster of hope and despair played out for millions. It was the first, but certainly not the last time they would have to watch the world find their son, only to have him slip through their fingers. The Porto Velho case set a precedent. It proved that the internet could mobilize a search on a global scale, but it also highlighted the profound danger of mistaken identity. Lars's features, tall, blonde, athletic, are common. In a state of distress, homeless, or suffering from mental illness, countless men could, at a glance, look like him. And the sightings kept coming. Back in Germany, another major lead emerged. This time in the city of Dresden. Multiple people reported seeing a homeless man who was the spitting image of Lars. He was sleeping in a forest on the outskirts of the city, seemed confused, and wouldn't speak to anyone. This felt more plausible. It was in Germany. It fit the amnesia theory that many held, that Lars had somehow made his way home but had no idea who he was. Concerned citizens left food and water for the man. They took photos from a distance, comparing them to Lars's poster. Again, the resemblance was striking. The online community buzzed with excitement. This had to be him. Local social workers and police were eventually able to make contact with the man. They identified him. And once again, it wasn't Lars. It was another individual, a man with his own life, his own problems, who just happened to look like the most famous missing person on YouTube. This became a torturous pattern. A photo from a homeless shelter in Dusseldorf. A report of a quiet, sad-eyed man working on a farm in the Netherlands. A tourist snapshot from a beach in Thailand with a blurry figure in the background that looked just right. Each lead would cause a frenzy. The family's Facebook page would be flooded with messages, some hopeful, some demanding, all of them insistent. This is him. You have to check this out. Imagine being Sandra Mittank. Imagine every day waking up to dozens of photos of strangers, sent by well-meaning people from across the globe, all claiming to have found your lost son. Imagine having to scrutinize the face of each suffering, destitute man, looking for a familiar glint in their eyes, a specific curve of their jaw. Imagine the surge of adrenaline, the desperate hope that this time it's real. And then imagine the crushing weight of disappointment over and over and over again. The internet had given them an army of searchers, but it had also given them an endless parade of ghosts. The private investigator hired by the family, Andreas Gudig, spent an enormous amount of his time simply managing this fire hose of false information. He had to develop a system, a triage for hope. He'd analyze the photos, compare facial features, and cross-reference locations and timelines. More often than not, he could debunk a sighting within hours. But each one took an emotional toll. Each one was a reminder that the search had become a public phenomenon, and they were no longer in control of the narrative. The case of Lars Mittank had transcended a simple missing person investigation. It had become a modern fable about the internet itself. Its power to connect, to amplify a message, but also its capacity to create feedback loops of misinformation and false hope. People weren't just trying to help. They were participating in a global mystery. They were part of the story. Finding Lars became a kind of collective goal, and in their eagerness they saw him everywhere. It was a textbook example of confirmation bias on a massive scale. Everyone had a picture of Lars in their head, and they were scanning the world looking for a match. But while the online world was chasing these doppelgangers across continents, from the Amazon to the streets of Dresden, the real investigation had to remain focused. Because the hard truth was this: every credible piece of evidence, every confirmed fact, still pointed back to one place. Varna, Bulgaria. The airport, the hotel, the beach, the doctor's office. The internet could speculate all it wanted, but the answers, if they existed at all, were not in a grainy video from Brazil. They were buried in the timeline of those last few chaotic days. The professional investigators knew that while the world was looking forward, trying to find where Lars went, the key was to look back, to understand exactly what he was running from. To do that, investigators had to go back to the beginning of the end. Back to the moment the trip took its dark turn. The fight, the official story, the one Lars told his friends and later his mother, was simple on the surface. He got into an argument with a group of other soccer fans at a bar. He was a Werder Bremen fan, they were Bayern Munich fans. Words were exchanged, things escalated outside, and Lars found himself alone, facing down 4 or 5 other men. He took a punch to the head, a blow so severe it ruptured his eardrum. His friends Paul, Tim, and Julian were 100 yards away at a fast food joint when it happened. By the time they got back, the fight was over and Lars was injured. This is the version of events that has been repeated for years. But when you dig deeper, the story starts to fray at the edges. Why did Lars separate from his friends in the first place? They had spent the entire week together, a tight-knit group. Why on the last night would he wander off alone, especially in an area known for late-night trouble? And what about the nature of the fight itself? A simple soccer rivalry that got out of hand? It's possible. It happens all the time. But the severity of the injury seems disproportionate to a typical drunken shoving match. A ruptured eardrum isn't just a lucky punch. It's a significant, debilitating injury. And then there's the most troubling question of all, the one that hangs over his friends. Why did they leave him? Their flight was the next morning. Lars, with his injury, was declared unfit to fly by a doctor. The pressure change in the cabin could cause permanent damage. So they made a decision. The 3 friends would fly home as planned, and Lars would stay behind, recover for a day or 2, and catch a bus back to Germany. On the surface, it sounds logical. They had jobs to get back to. Lars was an adult. But put yourself in that situation. Your best friend has just been assaulted by a group of strangers in a foreign country. He's injured, alone, and clearly shaken. Would you leave him? The friends insisted Lars was fine with the plan. He told them not to worry, that he would see them in a few days. They checked him into the Hotel Color, a cheap but reputable place, and left him with some cash. They said their goodbyes and headed to the airport. It was the last time they would ever see him. For years, online communities have vilified these friends, accusing them of abandonment, or worse, of hiding something. But their story to the police has remained consistent. They believed Lars was capable of getting home on his own. They had no idea the terror that was about to unfold, because the moment they were gone, Lars's reality began to fracture. He called his mother Sandra, not just to tell her about the injury, but to whisper about something far more sinister. He told her he was hiding. He said that the men from the fight, the 4 of them, they were looking for him. He said he'd found a place to hide in the hotel, and that they were trying to get into his room. He told her to cancel his credit cards, believing these men were after more than just a fight. They wanted to rob him. This is a critical turning point. The story shifts from a simple assault to a targeted pursuit. Who were these 4 men? Were they really Bayern Munich fans holding a grudge? Or was the soccer argument just a cover for something else? A robbery gone wrong? A deal that soured? The resort town of Golden Sands has a well-documented underbelly, a world of organized crime that tourists rarely see. It's a world where a simple bar fight can be a pretext for something much darker. Did Lars accidentally stumble into that world? Did he see something he wasn't supposed to see? This theory, the pursuit theory, suggests Lars wasn't running from a phantom. He was running from a very real threat. It explains his fear, his paranoia, his desperation to get home. The men he mentioned to his mother weren't a hallucination. They were the reason he ended up at the airport, seeking the first possible way out. But there's another theory, one that is, in many ways, even more terrifying, because it suggests the threat wasn't outside his hotel room. It was inside his own mind. Let's go back to the doctor. After the fight, Lars was seen by a local Bulgarian doctor who diagnosed his ruptured eardrum. To prevent infection, a common and serious risk with this type of injury, the doctor prescribed an antibiotic. That antibiotic was cefazolin 500. The brand name was cefuroxime. This detail for years was just a footnote in the case, a piece of medical trivia. But in the hands of dedicated online investigators, it became a potential Rosetta Stone for deciphering Lars's entire breakdown. Cefazolin is a powerful, broad-spectrum antibiotic. It's effective, it's common, and for the vast majority of people it's perfectly safe. But for a small, unlucky percentage of the population, it can have devastating side effects. Not just an upset stomach or a rash. We're talking about severe neuropsychiatric effects. The official medical literature lists them: anxiety, agitation, confusion, nightmares, paranoia, and in rare cases, full-blown psychosis and hallucinations. Suddenly, Lars's behavior doesn't just seem strange, it seems clinical. A young man, alone in a foreign country, injured, and now taking a powerful medication known to cause paranoia. Think about it. The frantic call to his mother. The belief that men were hunting him. The feeling that he couldn't trust anyone. The whispering. Hiding in his hotel room. Canceling his credit cards. Every single one of his bizarre actions in the 24 hours leading up to his disappearance aligns perfectly with a severe, adverse reaction to cefazolin. He wasn't just scared. His brain chemistry may have been fundamentally altered, throwing him into a state of acute delirium. He would have been unable to distinguish between what was real and what was a product of the drug-induced paranoia. His fear would have felt completely, utterly real. The shadows in the hallway would become men. The sound of a door closing down the hall would be his pursuers, getting closer. This theory offers a chillingly plausible internal explanation for his terror. He wasn't running from criminals. He was running from himself. And it gets worse. When Lars arrived at Varna Airport, desperate to fly home, he first went to see the airport doctor. He needed a final checkup to see if he could be cleared to fly. That doctor, a man named Kosta Kostov, examined him. He noted Lars seemed nervous, erratic, unbalanced. But he chalked it up to the stress of the situation. He re-examined Lars's ear and, according to his report, prescribed him the exact same antibiotic he was already taking, cefazolin. We don't know if Lars took this second dose. But imagine the scenario. His mind is already reeling from the potential side effects of the first dose. And he's now being advised to take more of the very substance that could be fueling his psychosis. It's a perfect storm. The doctor saw a nervous patient. He didn't see a man in the throes of a severe pharmacological reaction. He saw the symptoms, but he missed the cause. This medical theory is powerful because it provides a logical framework for what seems like an illogical breakdown. But it leaves one massive question unanswered. What about the four men? Were they just a figment of his imagination? A complete hallucination brought on by the medication? Or is the truth something more complex, more terrifying? What if both theories are true? What if there was a real threat? What if the men from the fight did have a reason to follow him, to intimidate him? Maybe they were local criminals who thought he was an easy mark. Maybe the fight wasn't random at all. Now, introduce a powerful, paranoia-inducing antibiotic into that equation. You have a young man facing a genuine danger, but his mind, warped by the medication, is unable to process it rationally. The threat becomes magnified, distorted. He can't think clearly, he can't make a plan. All he can do is react. All he can do is run. The real danger becomes an inescapable nightmare. He wouldn't just be scared. He would be utterly, primally terrified, convinced that death was right behind him, unable to trust anyone who tried to help, not even the doctor in that airport office. The doctor who was about to become the last person to ever speak with Lars Mittank. Inside that small, sterile room, Dr. Kosta Kostov tried to assess the young German man sitting before him. By all accounts, Dr. Kostov was calm, professional. He saw a patient who was clearly agitated, whose pupils were dilated, but who was also coherent enough to explain his situation. Lars told the doctor about the fight, the ruptured eardrum, and the cefprozil. He explained he couldn't fly. Dr. Kostov examined him and confirmed the injury. He agreed Lars should not get on a plane. He told him the ear would heal, that he was fine to travel by bus or train, and wrote him a note to that effect. He prescribed a different antibiotic, a lower dose, just in case. For a moment, it must have seemed like a resolution, a path forward. Lars was speaking to a medical professional, an authority figure who was validating his concerns and offering a solution. Maybe the fear began to subside. Maybe he thought, okay, I can get a bus. I can get home. He had his wallet, his passport, his phone, everything he needed. He was in a safe official place. But then the door opened, and everything changed. An airport employee walked in. Now the identity and purpose of this man has become one of the most debated details in this entire case. Some reports say he was a construction worker. Others, just a general airport staff member. His reason for being there? The airport was undergoing renovations, and he was supposedly there to talk to the doctor about some of the work. A completely mundane, everyday interaction. But that's not what Lars saw. When this man entered the room, Lars Mittank's demeanor shifted instantly. The fragile calm shattered. He reportedly shot up from his chair, his eyes wide with terror. He muttered something in German, words that Dr. Kostov couldn't understand but whose tone was unmistakable. Pure panic. According to the doctor, Lars said, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." He wasn't talking to the doctor. He wasn't talking to the worker. He was talking to himself, a desperate plea as his mind spiraled into an abyss. Before either man in the room could react, before they could even process what was happening, Lars bolted. He sprinted out of the medical office and into the main terminal of Varna Airport. And this is the moment that seared his story into the global consciousness. This is the moment captured by the airport's silent, unblinking CCTV cameras. The footage is grainy, almost surreal. It shows a healthy-looking young man, dressed in a yellow t-shirt and shorts, running for his life. He's not just jogging. He's not just in a hurry. He is in a full, desperate, all-out sprint. His arms are pumping, his face a mask of what can only be described as abject terror. He barrels through the terminal, dodging travelers in their luggage carts, a blur of motion and panic. He looks like a prey animal fleeing a predator that only he can see. He leaves everything behind. In that doctor's office sits his backpack. Inside is his wallet, his credit cards, his passport, his phone, his entire identity, the very things he would need to survive, to get home, to even prove who he is. He abandons it all without a second thought. People who intend to disappear and start a new life, they take their money and their passport. People fleeing for their life, they take nothing. His frantic path leads him straight towards the main entrance of the airport. For a split second, you might think he's just running outside trying to get away from the building. But he doesn't stop. He doesn't even slow down. He bursts through the glass doors and continues his sprint across the pavement, past the drop-off lanes, past the cars and taxis. He's heading for the airport's perimeter fence. This isn't some small chain-link fence you could hop over. This was a formidable barrier, at least 8 feet high, topped with barbed wire. It was built to keep people out and to keep them in. To any rational person, it would be a dead end. But Lars wasn't rational. He was operating on pure primal instinct. Witnesses watched, stunned, as this young man reached the fence and began to climb. He scrambled up the metal mesh with an agility and desperation that was shocking. He navigated the barbed wire at the top, somehow managing to get over it without getting seriously injured or tangled. He dropped down on the other side into a field, a massive, dense field of sunflowers. The sunflowers were tall, over 6 feet high, their heavy heads all facing the sun. They created a thick, impenetrable-looking wall of green and yellow, and into this wall Lars Mittank ran. He disappeared behind the first row of plants, and then he was gone. Just gone. The entire sequence, from the moment he fled the doctor's office to the moment he vanished into the field, took less than a minute. 1 minute of inexplicable terror that has now stretched into years of silent mystery. Back in the airport, there was chaos and confusion. Dr. Kostov and the airport employee were bewildered. They had no idea what had just happened. They secured Lars's belongings, assuming he would eventually come back for them. He had to, right? His entire life was in that bag. Meanwhile, in Germany, Sandra was waiting. Lars was supposed to have landed. When he didn't, she started to worry. She called his phone again and again. It rang unanswered, sitting in his backpack in a Bulgarian airport office. The hours ticked by. Panic began to set in. She called the friends he had been with. They were already back in Germany. They hadn't heard from him. They told her about the fight, the ear injury, the weird behavior at the hotel. Then she got the call. It was from Varna Airport. They told her that Lars had been there, that he'd had a medical consultation, and then he had run. He had run out of the airport, climbed the security fence, and disappeared into a field. They had his belongings, but they did not have him. Imagine receiving that call. It's a story that makes no sense. It's a nightmare. A person doesn't just run away from an airport, leaving their passport and phone behind. It's illogical. It's impossible. The Bulgarian authorities were notified immediately. A search was launched. Police officers, airport security, and tracker dogs were dispatched to the sunflower field. The area was vast, but the entry point was clear. They combed through the dense stalks, expecting to find him hiding, or perhaps collapse from exhaustion or injury. They searched the entire field. They searched the surrounding woods and farmlands. They used thermal imaging cameras from helicopters, hoping to pick up a heat signature in the dense vegetation. They found nothing. No sign of Lars. No discarded clothing. No footprints leading out of the area. No broken stalks that would indicate a struggle or a fall. It was as if the sunflower field had simply swallowed him whole. The man who sprinted across the tarmac, the man who scaled a barbed wire fence in a fit of terror, had vanished from the face of the earth. The most chilling part wasn't just that he was missing. It was the why. What could possibly drive a person to that extreme? What did he see in that doctor's office? Who was the man who walked through the door? Was he just an innocent airport worker who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? His appearance triggering a catastrophic paranoid delusion in Lars's mind? Or was he something else? Was he one of the men from the fight, sent to finish the job? Was he part of the shadowy organization Lars had mentioned to his mother? Was the threat real, and was Lars's flight not an act of madness, but a desperate and ultimately failed attempt to survive? The police investigated the airport worker. They found nothing to suggest he had any connection to Lars or any criminal activity. He was, by all accounts, exactly who he said he was. So if the threat wasn't the man himself, what was it? Was it the cefprozil? Had the antibiotic, a drug known in rare cases to cause hallucinations and psychosis, finally pushed his stressed and injured brain over the edge? Had it created a phantom, a boogeyman in a worker's uniform, turning a mundane moment into a life-or-death crisis inside his own mind? These questions hung in the air, as thick and suffocating as the summer heat over that Bulgarian field. Lars Mittank was gone, and the search for answers was just beginning. The investigation would soon uncover strange financial details and behavioral patterns that would only deepen the mystery, painting a picture of a young man whose life was far more complicated than anyone knew. As the sun set on golden sands, Lars Mittank was now truly alone, and the evidence of his spiraling distress began to accumulate at an alarming rate. The first clue that something was deeply wrong came not from a panicked phone call, but from a quiet, deliberate financial transaction. After his friends had left for the airport, Lars went to an ATM and withdrew a large sum of money, nearly all that was left in his account. But he didn't hold on to it. Instead, he walked into a Western Union office and wired a significant portion of it, about 500 euros, back to his mother in Germany. This single act is a paradox that sits at the heart of the mystery. On one hand, it's a gesture of profound fear. It's the move of someone who believes they are in imminent danger, someone who wants to ensure their money is safe, out of reach of those who might harm them. It suggests he felt he was being targeted, and that his money was either the target or a liability. But on the other hand, it's an act of incredible foresight and rationality. In a moment of supposed panic, he navigated an international money transfer, a process that requires a clear head. And why send the money home if he needed it to buy a new plane ticket, to pay for a hotel to survive? It makes no sense unless he believed he wouldn't be the one using it. This financial puzzle was soon overshadowed by a series of increasingly frantic phone calls to his mother, Sandra. The first calls were alarming but coherent. He told her they had canceled his credit cards and he needed her to unblock them. He sounded scared. He whispered that he was hiding, that he didn't feel safe. He told her about 4 men who were following him, the same men from the beach fight, he believed. He was convinced they were hired by the guys he had argued with to beat him up or worse. Sandra, thousands of miles away, was growing frantic herself. She tried to calm him down, to reason with him, to get him to go to the German consulate. But as the night wore on, the calls became more and more disjointed. His whispers grew more intense. During one call, he told her he was hiding in a hotel, but he wouldn't say which one. He said he'd found a place to hide. He told her to call him back on the hotel phone, but when she did, he didn't answer. The terror in his voice was escalating. He told her he was hearing things, that the men were closing in. Then came the call that has haunted his family and investigators for years. In a hushed, terrified whisper, Lars uttered a phrase that remains chillingly ambiguous. He said, "They don't want me to die." Or, depending on the interpretation, "They don't want me to live." The German phrasing is apparently unclear. And the difference is monumental. Is it a statement of reassurance that his pursuers only intend to harm him? Or is it a sentence of death? This single, garbled sentence captures the essence of his paranoia. He was being pursued by a nameless, faceless they, and their intentions were terrifyingly unclear. His movements that night were just as erratic. After leaving the Western Union, he flagged down a taxi. The driver later reported that Lars seemed agitated, looking over his shoulder constantly. Partway through the journey, Lars suddenly ordered him to stop. He scrambled out of the car and sprinted off into a dark, overgrown field, disappearing from view. A few minutes later he reappeared, got back in the taxi as if nothing had happened, and asked to be taken to a cheap hotel. He checked into the Hotel Color, a budget lodging far from the tourist-heavy beachfront. It was from this hotel that he made some of his most desperate calls, telling his mother he was hiding under the covers, peering out the window, convinced that the four men were outside, waiting for him. What could possibly explain this sudden, catastrophic descent into paranoia? The most prevalent theory circles back to the fight on the beach. While a ruptured eardrum is painful and disorienting, it's the unseen injury that many believe holds the key. Lars suffered a significant blow to the head. It's entirely possible he sustained an undiagnosed concussion or a more severe traumatic brain injury. A TBI can have profound and unpredictable effects on the brain. Symptoms can include confusion, disorientation, memory loss, and in some cases, severe paranoia and psychosis. The injury could have been a ticking time bomb in his skull, with the pressure and stress of being alone in a foreign country causing his symptoms to explode into a full-blown psychological crisis. He wasn't just scared. His brain was betraying him, twisting reality into a waking nightmare where everyone was a threat and every shadow hid an enemy. There is another, more specific medical theory that has gained traction online. The doctor at the first hospital prescribed Lars an antibiotic called cefuroxime 500. It's a common, generally safe medication used to prevent infection, especially with an injury like a perforated eardrum. However, in extremely rare cases, this class of antibiotics can have severe neuropsychiatric side effects. These can include anxiety, confusion, hallucinations, and acute psychosis. Is it possible that Lars was one of the unlucky few to have a severe, adverse reaction to the very medication meant to help him? Did a simple antibiotic, combined with the trauma of a head injury and the stress of his situation, create a perfect storm that shattered his perception of reality? We can't know for sure. But what is clear is that the Lars Mittank who would walk into Varna airport the next morning was not the same man who had arrived in Bulgaria a week earlier. He was a man in the grip of a profound terror, whether real, imagined, or a horrifying combination of the two. After a sleepless night spent hiding in his hotel room, Lars took a taxi to the airport on the morning of July 8th. He was still on the phone with his mother, who had managed to book him a bus ticket home as a backup. She told him to find the airport doctor to get checked out one last time, and to get a letter clearing him to fly. She begged him to stay on the line, to talk to her, to not hang up. Lars told her that he had finally made it to the airport. He said, "I'm at the terminal." He sounded relieved, as if reaching this place of security, of bright lights and authority figures, was the end of his ordeal. Sandra felt a wave of relief wash over her. He was safe. He was surrounded by people. He was about to see a doctor and get on a plane home. But as he walked through those sliding glass doors, he wasn't walking towards a flight home. He was walking into the final frantic moments of his known existence, and into the lens of a security camera that would capture an image so bizarre, so inexplicable, it would turn his private terror into a global obsession. It's just after dawn on July 8, 2014. The Varna airport terminal is beginning to stir with the familiar hum of early morning travel. A yellow taxi pulls up to the curb. The door opens and out steps Lars Mittank. He pays the driver, grabs his bags from the trunk, and walks toward the sliding glass doors. To any casual observer, he's just another tourist heading home, perhaps a little worse for wear after a week of partying, but otherwise unremarkable. He looks tired but composed. He is so close, so agonizingly close to escaping the nightmare that has consumed him for the last 48 hours. The flight to Hamburg is waiting. His mother is waiting. Safety is just a boarding pass away. He enters the terminal, a vast sterile space of polished floors and check-in counters. He finds the airport's medical center, a small, unassuming office tucked away from the main concourse. This is his final hurdle. He needs a doctor to sign off, to declare him fit to fly despite the ruptured eardrum. He needs that piece of paper to get on the plane. He walks in, sits down, and begins to explain his situation to the airport physician, Dr. Kostov. Dr. Kostov later described Lars as nervous and erratic. He was jumpy, his eyes darting around the small examination room. He seemed fundamentally unsettled. Lars repeated the story he'd been telling his mother. He couldn't trust the Cefsol 500. He was afraid of the medication. He expressed a deep, paranoid fear about the men from the hotel, the 4 men he believed were after him. He was clearly in a state of distress, but Dr. Kostov focused on the physical injury, examined his ear and confirmed what Lars already knew. He was not fit to fly. The change in cabin pressure could cause severe pain and further damage. The doctor tried to calm him down, assuring him he would be fine and that he could likely travel the next day. He was patient, professional. He was trying to help. But Lars was not listening. His mind was elsewhere, trapped in a loop of fear. He kept murmuring about the men, how they wouldn't let him leave Bulgaria. And it's right here in this tiny sterile room that the situation escalates from strange to utterly terrifying. As Lars and the doctor are talking, another man enters the office. According to the doctor's statement, this man was an airport construction worker, there for a completely unrelated reason. He was just a guy in a uniform, a random variable in an already chaotic equation. But Lars didn't see a construction worker. We can only imagine what he saw. Did he see one of the men from the hotel? Did the uniform, the unfamiliar face, the sudden intrusion, simply trigger a catastrophic break? Whatever the reason, the sight of this man was the final spark on a trail of gunpowder. Lars's demeanor changed in an instant. The nervous energy, the quiet paranoia, it all detonated. He shot up from his chair. He started muttering, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." His eyes were wide with a terror that the doctor could not comprehend. It was pure primal panic. Before Dr. Kostov could say a word, before the construction worker could even process what was happening, Lars bolted. He didn't just walk out. He exploded out of the room. He left everything. His backpack, containing his wallet, his passport, and his cell phone, lay on the examination chair. He abandoned every single thing that tied him to his own identity. He ran with nothing but the clothes on his back and the terror in his mind. And this is the moment. This is the image that has been viewed tens of millions of times. The image that turned a personal tragedy into a global mystery. The Varna airport security camera, positioned high on a wall, captures the scene with cold, digital indifference. The footage is grainy, silent, and utterly haunting. We see the main exit of the terminal. People are milling about, pulling suitcases, saying their goodbyes. It's a perfectly normal morning. Then from the left of the frame a figure appears. It's Lars. But he's not walking. He's sprinting. He's running with the kind of all-out, desperate abandon you only see when someone believes their life is at stake. His arms are pumping, his head is down. He's not looking back. He bursts through the main entrance, a blur of motion against the backdrop of oblivious travelers. He dodges people, weaving through them without breaking stride. He is a man possessed by a singular, terrifying purpose: escape. He sprints across the roadway in front of the terminal, past the taxis and shuttle buses. He doesn't even seem to register them. His target is a fence on the far side of the airport grounds. A tall, chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. It's over 8 feet high, a formidable barrier designed to keep people out, not in. For Lars, it's not an obstacle. It's the only way out. In the footage, you see his athleticism take over. He reaches the fence and, without a moment's hesitation, he begins to climb. He scales it with a desperate, frantic agility. He scrambles up, his hands and feet finding purchase in the chain link. He reaches the top, navigates the barbed wire with a shocking disregard for his own safety, and throws himself over the other side, landing in a crouch. He stands, glances back for a fraction of a second, a final fleeting look at the world he is leaving behind, and then he's gone. He disappears into a dense, sprawling field of sunflowers that bordered the airport property. The sunflowers were tall, over 6 feet in height, a vast golden sea that swallowed him whole. One moment he was there, a figure of pure panic silhouetted against the morning sky. The next he was simply gone. vanished into the foliage. That grainy, silent 30-second clip is the last positive proof of life for Lars Mittank. It's the final definitive frame of his story. He ran from the airport, a place of safety and his only route home. He ran from his passport, his money, his phone. He ran over a barbed wire fence. He ran into a field of sunflowers and was never, ever seen again. Back inside the terminal, there was only confusion. Dr. Kostov was bewildered. The construction worker was stunned. Airport security was alerted, but by the time they understood what had happened, Lars was long gone. They had his belongings. They had his identity, but the man himself had evaporated. The police were called, and an official search began almost immediately. They combed the area. They scoured the sunflower field, a massive, dense expanse of land adjacent to a major highway. They found nothing. No footprints. No scraps of clothing. No sign of a struggle. It was as if the earth itself had opened up and swallowed him. He ran into that field, and in doing so, he ran off the edge of the map. And when the map ends, speculation begins. For years, the internet has tried to redraw that map, to fill in the blank space Lars Mittank ran into. The theories range from the plausible to the cinematic, each one an attempt to impose order on an event defined by pure chaos. The most sensational theory, and the one that often grabs the most attention, is that Lars was being hunted. That the men from the beach bar brawl weren't just random guys. They were part of something bigger, something sinister. Human trafficking, organ harvesting. The story goes that Lars overheard something he shouldn't have, or that the fight was a pretext to isolate him. In this version of events, his paranoia wasn't paranoia at all. It was a perfectly rational fear. The men he saw at the airport were real. The threat was real. His desperate call to his mother, "They don't want me to die, they want me to be robbed," takes on a chilling literal meaning. But like many movie plots, it begins to fray under scrutiny. If a sophisticated criminal ring wanted to abduct Lars, why would they let him get to a public airport, a place filled with cameras and security? Why the convoluted chase? And if they did corner him in the doctor's office, why would they let him run? It seems a remarkably inefficient and public way for a shadowy organization to operate. While it's a terrifying thought, the evidence for an organized conspiracy is circumstantial at best, built more on our collective fear of the unknown than on concrete facts. So if he wasn't running from a real external threat, was he running from an internal one? This is where the story shifts from a crime thriller to a psychological tragedy. And it all comes back to that one pivotal event, the fight on the beach. Lars told his friends he took a punch to the ear. The doctor confirmed it, a ruptured eardrum. But what if the damage was more than just to his ear? A blow to the side of the head hard enough to perforate an eardrum could easily cause a concussion, a traumatic brain injury. And the symptoms of a TBI are a terrifying match for Lars's behavior: confusion, disorientation, mood swings, and severe paranoia. Imagine his world in those final days. He's in a foreign country, he doesn't speak the language, he's in pain, and his brain, the very organ he relies on to make sense of the world, is malfunctioning. Simple misunderstandings could be twisted into perceived threats. A glance from a stranger becomes a menacing stare. A group of people talking becomes a conspiracy. The world itself becomes the enemy. Now, add another layer to this potential brain injury: the medication. The doctor prescribed him an antibiotic called cefprozil. And while it's a common antibiotic, if you dig into the patient information leaflets, you'll find a list of rare but documented psychiatric side effects. Among them, anxiety, confusion, nervousness, and in very rare cases, psychosis and paranoid delusions. We have a young man with a possible concussion, who is then given a medication that has the potential to cause the exact symptoms he was displaying. It's a perfect storm, a cascade of neurological and pharmacological events that could have sent him spiraling into a full-blown psychotic break. Viewed through this lens, his actions, while bizarre, suddenly have a terrifying internal logic. He hides in his hotel room not from assassins, but from phantoms his injured mind has conjured. He calls his mom and tells her to cancel his credit cards because in his paranoid state, he believes they are after his money. The man who entered the doctor's office wasn't a threat. He was just a construction worker. But to Lars's fractured perception, he was the confirmation of all his fears. He was one of them. And the only logical response in that moment of pure terror was to run as fast and as far as he could, away from a danger that existed only inside his own head. This theory of a medical crisis culminating in a paranoid flight is the one that most investigators and experts lean towards. It doesn't require a criminal conspiracy or a secret plot. It only requires a series of tragic, unfortunate events. A single punch that scrambled his perception of reality. If this is true, what happened after he vaulted that fence? A man in a state of severe psychosis, running blindly into a dense, unfamiliar landscape, is incredibly vulnerable. The field he ran into is vast, bordered by a sunflower field, a highway and difficult terrain. He could have succumbed to the elements. He could have become disoriented, fallen, and been injured, unable to call for help. He could have, in his confused state, continued to run, to hide from everyone, even potential rescuers, believing they were part of the conspiracy against him. It's a heartbreaking scenario. That he died alone, lost and terrified, just meters away from safety. But there is one other possibility. A sliver of hope that his mother, Sandra Mittank, and thousands online still cling to. What if he survived? A severe head injury can sometimes lead to profound amnesia. It's possible Lars got lost and simply forgot who he was. He might have been found by someone, taken in, and is living a new life somewhere, a ghost to his past with no memory of his family, his friends, or the life he left behind. Over the years, there have been dozens of alleged sightings. A trucker in Dresden claimed to have given a ride to a disheveled young man matching Lars's description. A man was found living rough in a forest in Brazil, dubbed the German from the beach. Each time hope surges, and each time it's been a false alarm. Case of mistaken identity. This is the agonizing cruelty of the Lars Mittank case. There is no resolution. No body. No final answer. There is only that footage. That silent 17-second clip of a young man in a yellow shirt, sprinting out of an airport and into oblivion. That video is the reason Lars is called the most famous missing person on YouTube. It's what separates his story from thousands of other tragic disappearances. We are eyewitnesses to his last known moments. We can watch it, rewind it, analyze it frame by frame. We see a normal tourist, a son, a friend, in one instant, and a terrified, desperate fugitive in the next. The transformation is absolute, and it happens right before our eyes. He becomes a digital ghost, doomed to forever replay his panic for an audience of millions. His disappearance holds up a mirror to one of our most primal fears. The fear of losing our minds, of our own perception betraying us. The fear that the line between a normal vacation and an inescapable nightmare is terrifyingly thin. And the fear that in a world of GPS, satellites, and constant connection, you can still somehow simply vanish. But for all the internet fame, for all the theories and the video essays, we have to remember that this isn't just a mystery. It's a tragedy. Sandra Mittank has never stopped searching for her son. For her, he is not a YouTube phenomenon. He is not a case to be solved. He is Lars, her boy, who loved fishing and football, who was close with his parents, who went on a trip with his friends and never came home. Her search is a quiet, constant, unending vigil. And while the world sees a ghost on a screen, she is just looking for her son, hoping that one day, he'll walk back out of that field and off the edge of the map, and finally find his way home.